Flight 728 had been in the air for 30 minutes when Maya Carter suddenly stood from seat 14. She looked calm, but something in her eyes made the people around her uneasy. A flight attendant approached her. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" Maya looked toward the cockpit. "I need to speak with the captain." "I'm sorry," the attendant replied politely. "Passengers aren't allowed in the cockpit during the flight." Maya leaned closer. "You need to tell Captain Reynolds that Maya Carter is here." The attendant froze. "How do you know the captain's name?" Maya didn't answer. Before she could say anything else, the aircraft suddenly shook. Several passengers gasped as cups slid across tray tables. The captain's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We're experiencing some unexpected turbulence." But Maya didn't look surprised. She stared directly at the cockpit door. "Please," she whispered, "tell him now." The attendant reluctantly contacted the cockpit captain. "There is a passenger requesting to speak with you. Her name is Maya Carter." For several seconds, there was complete silence. Then the captain's voice came through. "Repeat that name, Maya Carter." Another silence. Then the captain said something that shocked the attendant. "Send her to the cockpit." "Captain, are you sure?" "Now." The attendant looked at Maya. Maya slowly walked toward the cockpit. When the door opened, Captain Reynolds stared at her as if he had seen a ghost. "You..." Maya stood silently. The captain's face became pale. "You were supposed to be dead." Maya swallowed hard. "I know." The co-pilot looked between them. "What is going on?" Maya reached into her small black bag and pulled out an old photograph. She placed it in front of Captain Reynolds. His hands began to tremble. Maya whispered, "You remember my father, don't you?" Reynolds stared at the photograph. Then suddenly, another warning alarm began screaming. The aircraft had developed a serious problem. Captain Reynolds quickly locked the cockpit door. The co-pilot looked at him in confusion. "Captain, who is she?" Reynolds didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on Maya and the old photograph she had placed on the console. Asterisk, "That picture," he whispered. Asterisk, "My father gave it to me," Maya said, "before he died." Reynolds slowly sat down. "Your father was one of the best pilots I ever knew, and you were his student," Maya replied. The captain nodded. 11 years. Ago. Maya's voice became colder. "Everyone said my father died because of pilot error." Reynolds looked away. Asterisk, "That wasn't the truth." Maya stepped closer. Asterisk, "Then tell me what really happened." Before Reynolds could answer, the aircraft suddenly dropped. The co-pilot grabbed the controls. "Captain," warning lights flashed across the cockpit. Reynolds immediately took control. Asterisk, "We've lost power." From the left engine, Maya stared through the windshield. Was trailing behind the aircraft. The co-pilot contacted air traffic control. Asterisk, "Flight 728, we have an engine malfunction." Reynolds checked the instruments. "It's getting worse." Maya remained strangely calm. "You need to shut it down." The co-pilot looked at her. "How do you know that?" "My father taught me." Reynolds stared at Maya. "What else did he teach you?" She opened her black bag and removed a small voice recorder. "My father left this for me." She pressed the button. Static filled the cockpit. Then a weak male voice emerged. "Maya, if you're hearing this, something happened to me." Reynolds suddenly went pale. The recording continued. Asterisk, "Your father's voice was unmistakable." Asterisk, "Captain Reynolds knows what happened. He knows I didn't make that mistake." Maya looked directly at Reynolds. The recording stopped for a moment. Then her father's final words played. "And if Reynolds is still flying..." A long pause followed. "Tell him I discovered who was responsible." The cockpit fell silent. Reynolds stared at Maya. She whispered, "Who killed my father?" Before he could answer, the aircraft violently shook. Again, a second warning alarm began flashing. Reynolds looked at the instruments. His face turned pale. "The second engine is overheating." And Maya realized they weren't facing an accident. Asterisk, someone had planned this. The second engine temperature continued to rise. Captain Reynolds gripped the controls tightly. "Mayday, Flight 728. We have a serious engine emergency." Air traffic control responded immediately. "Flight 728, descend to 12,000 feet and divert east." Reynolds checked the navigation display. "That route won't work." The co-pilot looked at him. "Why?" "If the second engine fails, we won't have enough power to reach the nearest major airport." Maya stepped closer to the controls. Asterisk, "There's another option." Both pilots looked at her. Asterisk, "My father told me about an old military runway north of here." The co-pilot frowned. "That runway was abandoned years ago." "It still exists," Maya said, "and it's closer." Reynolds studied the map. After a few seconds, he found it. She was right. "We're going there," he said. Asterisk, suddenly, the radio crackled. A strange voice came through. "Flight 700, divert immediately." Reynolds frowned. Asterisk, "Identify yourself." There was no response. The transmission ended. Maya looked at the communication panel. Asterisk, "That wasn't air traffic control." The co-pilot shook his head. "Then who was it?" Before anyone could answer, the navigation screen flickered. Aircraft identification suddenly disappeared. Asterisk Reynolds stared at the screen. Asterisk, that's impossible. Maya's expression changed. Someone is changing the aircraft's identification. The co-pilot looked terrified. Can someone do that from the ground? Not without access, Reynolds replied. Asterisk Maya remembered her father's recording. Asterisk she looked at Reynolds. Asterisk my father knew this would happen. Reynolds said nothing. Maya stepped closer. He wasn't investigating an accident, was he? The captain finally looked at her. No, what was he investigating? Reynolds hesitated. He discovered that several aircraft had been deliberately sabotaged. Maya's heart sank, and he found the person responsible. Reynolds nodded. He was getting close. Suddenly the cockpit door unlocked. All three froze. The door slowly opened. A flight attendant stood outside, her face pale. Asterisk Captain. Reynolds immediately stood. What happened? She looked toward the rear of the aircraft. There's a man in the cabin. Asterisk who? The attendant swallowed. He has no ticket. Maya looked at Reynolds. The captain's expression changed. Asterisk. He already knew who the man was. Asterisk, and then the flight attendant whispered, he left a message for you. Captain Reynolds took the message from the flight attendant. Asterisk, there were only 5 words written on the paper. Asterisk, you should have stayed silent. For a moment, nobody spoke. Maya stared at the captain. He knows about us. Reynolds nodded. Get everyone prepared for an emergency landing. The aircraft shook violently. A warning alarm filled the cockpit. As the second engine began losing power, asterisk, we're going down. The co-pilot shouted. Reynolds looked at the navigation screen. The abandoned runway was their only chance. Asterisk, hold on. He lowered the aircraft through the clouds below them. The old runway finally appeared. Asterisk, it was narrow, cracked, and surrounded by trees. Maya watched silently as Reynolds lined up the aircraft. Come on. The wheels touched the runway. The plane bounced hard. Asterisk. Metal screamed against the ground. Asterisk, for several terrifying seconds, it seemed impossible to stop. Asterisk, then the aircraft finally came to a halt. Silence filled the cabin. They had survived. Asterisk, emergency. Vehicles quickly surrounded the plane. Asterisk, passengers were escorted outside while police entered the aircraft. Asterisk, the mysterious man was found hiding near the rear of the cabin. Asterisk, but Maya was still waiting for one answer. She turned to Reynolds. Who was responsible for my father's death? The captain lowered his head. I should have told you years ago. Asterisk, tell me now. Reynolds took a deep breath. Asterisk, your father discovered that someone inside the aircraft company was deliberately covering up dangerous mechanical failures. Maya's eyes widened. Reynolds looked toward the police. My father. Maya froze. Your father? Yes, he was an executive at the company. Your father discovered what he was doing and threatened to expose him. Asterisk, and you knew. I was ordered to stay silent. Maya's eyes filled with tears. For 11 years. Reynolds nodded. I was afraid. Maya looked back at the aircraft. Then she played her father's final recording. Asterisk, his voice filled the quiet air. Asterisk, Maya, if you hear this, remember one thing. I never made that mistake. I was trying to protect people. Maya closed her eyes. For 11 years. She had believed her father died because of a mistake. Now she finally knew the truth. Captain Reynolds looked at her. Asterisk, you weren't supposed to be in my cockpit today. Maya wiped her tears. Then why did you let me in? He answered quietly, because your father trusted you with the truth.